Have you ever thought this phrase, of all the times, and you can complete it with a lot of different things, but that happened to me this past Friday when I was taking care of one of the horses that I work with, named Arundel. And Arundel is a skittish horse right now. He's young, he's 5 years old. He's beautiful, but he gets scared a lot. And for any of you who have ever been around horses, that can be kind of an intense experience. When you see this horse that's very stoic, just kind of sitting there, all of a sudden you realize just how much energy and how much speed they have. And sometimes it could be something like a door opening, it could be just a sudden noise. But as I'm taking care of Arundel, I look across the field and I see this giant sprayer machine. You know those big, giant, monstrous things that go all the way across during this time of spraying. And at the 8 o'clock Mass, I called it a combine. And all of our farmers were like, no, that's a sprayer. Combines don't come out right now. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. So this sprayer machine is coming in the distance. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to lift up his head, let him see over there. And he's just kind of like, okay, that's fine. So I'm like, okay, that's good. But then I start noticing the sprayer machine. He must have saw me and said, well, I want to just make his life interesting. So he turns, and he's coming around, and he's coming from like here to the door. That's a big, giant machine, and I'm thinking to myself, it's coming. My horse is going to freak out right now. This horse is already a skittish horse, and it's just going to like go crazy. And the last time it went crazy, I like pretty much ran away from the horse, so that didn't help. I was just like, I got to get out of here. But this time I remembered what I learned, that as a partner with that horse, I have a responsibility and a way of helping this horse through the trauma of scary things. If I get afraid and I run away, then that's going to transfer to that horse, and they'll become more afraid. But if I stay with the horse in the midst of the scary moment, and I'm with them in that moment, and I place my hand on their shoulder, which is right where their heart is, and I speak to them, saying, it's all right. That machine's not going to eat you. Don't worry. Then little by little, that horse will then receive the calm that's within me, and it'll go into them, and it will help them to be able to brave a scary world. And that's actually exactly what happened. It was exciting to see this victory where the big machine came around, it was coming, Arundel was happily eating, and I'm like, okay, I know it's coming, and all of a sudden the ears go up, the head goes up, the eyes go up, and then all of a sudden he starts bolting here and there. And I just kind of stay on his shoulder, and he kind of swings around me. But in the midst of that, even though part of me is like, I got to run away. This is scary. But I placed my hand on his shoulder as we're moving around, and I started talking to him. And little by little, that scary machine started not to be as scary. And that will be something that he will carry with him as he continues to grow through this healing experience of being able to discover the peace that you can have in a scary world of many machines and different things like that. So why do I share this today? Well, I couldn't go over to that scary machine and try to push it out of the way. Because if I did, I'd get in trouble, right? I can't make the world safe completely for my horse friend Arundel. But I can help him to have a peace in his heart that allows him to brave and to thrive in the scary world. And that dynamic there is ultimately the essence of the vocation of parenthood. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm like the parent of this horse, but there's something here that's important for us to see. And I learned this from Father Michael Schmitz when I was on retreat with him. And he said these words to me. He said, one of the crises in our modern conception of parenthood, and it comes from a variety of different places, and maybe you feel this burden, those of you who are parents, is that there's this kind of voice in our culture that is saying, to be a parent means you have to make the entire world safe for your child. You have to make it completely sanitized. And of course, if your child is walking towards a lion, you say, okay, let's not go towards the lion. If they're going towards the street, you grab them and say, no. But when it becomes something where it's like, my job as a parent is to make sure that you never suffer, you never get hurt, you're never afraid, you never get a cut whatsoever. We even have the phrase, the helicopter parent, coming in, swooping in, making sure that nothing happens ever, ever, ever to my child. And in some ways that seems very good, but there's a danger that happens because if you, as parents, you know the unrealistic expectation of that and the incredible burden of if anything goes wrong, then it means that I'm not a good parent. And yet you can't make the entire world safe. It's not within your capacity to do that. And if you try, you will burn yourself out. And you will also set up your child for a great fall. When something happens that doesn't go expected, they don't know how to deal with that. And if you think about it, it transfers even further to our understanding of God. And I think this really gets to the crisis of maybe how we struggle with our relationship with God. Because God is called Father. He's our parent. And yet, if our understanding of our parents are supposed to make everything okay and never let me suffer, never let me get hurt, never let me experience something that's discomfortable, then the moment something happens in my life and I look to God and to say, God, why aren't you fixing this? Why aren't you taking away this hurt? Why aren't you taking away this cross? And we start to say, God, you're not a good parent because you didn't take care of that area where that I fell. Do you see how it transfers all the way down? And so then Father Michael Schmitz said this that I thought was very, very important. The role of a parent is not to make the world completely sanitized and safe, but rather it's to give your child, to feed them the strength to have a heart that's courageous and a heart that's willing to go into an unsafe world and thrive in truth, goodness, and beauty. It's not to take away the storm, but it's to give the strength to be able to say, I can walk into that storm and not be afraid. I can live my life even when the sprayer machine comes around, and I don't have to be afraid of it. That's what Jesus is doing for Peter today when he says, Simon, feed my sheep, feed my lambs. And he does it for Peter first because he says, when you were younger, you used to dress yourself and go where you pleased. But when you get older, someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. He said this by showing what way Peter would glorify God in his death. And then he says, follow me. And we see how Jesus touched Peter's heart in that moment and said, I'm not going to take away the cross. I'm not going to take away the pain. But I will give you the heart to be able to rejoice that you have been found worthy to suffer dishonor for the sake of the name. That's what happened with these apostles in the first reading. They were whipped, they were scourged, and they started to rejoice. This paradox of in the midst of suffering, they experienced the deep embrace of God. In the midst of the cross, they discovered that there is someone who has gone to the grave and back, and he is the one that gives them a peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that is not, it's not to be found just in this world, but it's something beyond this world that reaches into this world, places in our heart, and gives us the strength to say, no matter what happens in this world, I know the infinite love of God. And I know that ultimately this world is passing away. And so anything that happens in this world, any cross, any suffering, will be transformed into glory, into joy, into a peace that is indescribable. Heaven is not merely just an extension of this life. It's not like, okay, we're doing this and then we go there. Okay, now what do we do? But everything that happens in this life somehow has a connection with the life to come. Whatever hurts or wounds, just like Jesus himself in his wounds when he was glorified, those wounds, those holes in his hands became transformed into light, into mercy that poured out. And it's through those wounds that we are healed. And so the Lord says to each of us, feed my sheep. Feed my lambs. We have to be like the rider that's willing to be with our children in the midst of the scary times, and to be willing to extend our hands, to not retreat away and say, hands up, I'm getting out of here, but to be able to stand in the storm and to say, I'm not going to take away the machine over there. That's not within my ability. But I can give you the strength to thrive in this world by knowing that there is a God who has conquered death by death and can even take your suffering and transform it into glory, into beauty, into goodness, and to experience the deep hug of God. And yet it's also important for us to remember that as we stand with our children, or our spiritual children, whoever they are, those people that have been brought to us that we're called to feed them with physical food, yes, but especially this food of peace, of love. We have to recognize that we can't fully feed them. Sometimes we think, I have to be the one that completes you. I have to be the one that pours everything in there, and then you'll be okay. But remember that the peace that we have is fragile on our own, because we're broken. But that's where we need to bring people to the one who is peace himself. And this brings us to a Eucharistic understanding of what Jesus is saying to Simon Peter, feed my sheep. You can't give them peace yourself, but you can bring them to the one who is peace in the Eucharist. Because it's there that you experience the one who can truly give the anchor for your soul, that allows whatever storm goes on, whatever machine comes, you can be able to have that deep anchor that goes down of the Eucharistic love of Jesus Christ. And it's there that the saints have discovered the mystery of, even in the midst of profound suffering, they're able to dance, they're able to smile, and they're able to say, it is well with my soul. They're able to say, like the second reading today, blessing, glory, and honor be to our God forever. So feed the children. Bring them to the Eucharist.